everyone. Jim Coventry from RotoWire here with the big five takeaways from Wildcard Weekend. But there were 5 games, so we have 5 takeaways. There's a 6-game Monday night. We'll deal with that later in the week. All right, let's start out with the Seahawks. You know what? I want to go to the Chargers and the Jaguars. I think to me that was some compelling football. So let's talk about that one. So when we talk about that game, it was very interesting. I always say that, especially in the playoffs, if you are going to jump out to a massive lead for whatever reason, it gets very problematic, especially how you built the lead. If you built the lead because you are so much more dominant than the other team, then you're able to come out. Actually, I got to move this over. Sorry, guys. All right. So, yeah, if you're going to come out and dominate because you are so much the better team, that's one thing. But remember, we had a double tip interception. We had one that was probably illegal contact. And then we had the punt that hit the guy's helmet and there was a fumble. So that big lead the Chargers got wasn't because they were that much better than the Jaguars. It was a combination of playing good football, but they had incredibly good fortune. Now, the game plan coming out was phenomenal. They understood in pass defense, they knew Lawrence wanted to throw mostly short, a little intermediate, and they locked those routes down, and they were not completing many passes. So definitely props to the defense. They did a great job as a great defensive planning early in the game. As I mentioned, you get that early lead. And the problem becomes now your mental switch. We talk about this all season long, right? It's ingrained in human nature. Your coach can tell you, you can tell yourself, they're dangerous. They're dangerous. We're up 27-0, but they're still dangerous. I mean, your brain at some point says you won and you can't undo the switch. And when that happens, the natural inclination is to back off. Now, on the other side of the ball, oh, thanks, Pure MVP. Yeah, I got the Scott Fishbowl shirt on today. So on the other side of the ball, in the regular season, a lot of times when the team's getting buried 27-0, a lot of times they may fold. Not always, but in the playoffs, your season is on the line. You have desperation going for you. And it's a great combination when you have desperation versus the mental checkout, that primal idea that you won and you rest. They don't verbally say that. They don't believe that, but they in the back of their mind, they feel it. So that combination, as soon as the Jaguars made it 27-7, I was watching the game with a family member. I'm like, you know what? I would not be surprised if the Jaguars came back. I would not be surprised if the Jaguars won at this point. And, personally, I thought going into the game, the Chargers were going to win this game. But I felt very uneasy about it at that point. In the second half, a lot of this is really laid on the feet, I think, of the Chargers coaching staff. Remember in the first half how the defensive backs were jumping routes. They were not giving them room to breathe. All of a sudden, they backed off, and everything was click, 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 completion, completion, completion. It was a completely different defense. It was almost like a prevent defense in my mind, where it's like, okay, just don't let them beat us all for one play. And that is the worst way to play football. When you get that big lead, you go with what got you there. They had a great game plan. If they would have kept that game plan going, I don't think the Jaguars could have scored all those points. And then on the offensive side of the ball for the Chargers, the problem was this. I broke this game down last week. If you guys saw me on that, it was like you cannot run the ball inside on the Jaguars with that offensive line that you have, number 30 run blocking. Austin Eckler's a great running back, but you need him out on the edges a bit more. He's not a sustaining, grinding runner. And against this defense, that was not going to be the best play. And yet, time after time in that second half, they ran the ball into a brick wall on 1st and 10, 2nd and 8. 2nd and 12, 2nd and 10, and they put themselves in a horrible down and distance situation, became predictable passing, no Mike Williams. It just was ugly at that point. And then the Jaguars, with nothing to lose, were able to, disguise pressures, choose when they were going to send specific pressures, and it was a perfect storm for them. But the Chargers followed that old conventional wisdom, run the ball when you have a big lead, drain the clock. You got to get first downs to do that. You have to have the rushing attack to be able to do that. If you were the Philadelphia Eagles with a 27-0 lead and you're taking that big 5-man line and you're saying we're going to beat your behind for the next 30 minutes on the ground, yeah, go ahead and do it, because good luck stopping them, right? You're not going to. They're going to get their first down, but not the Chargers. And the timeouts. the obvious challenge that they shouldn't have gone for. They wasted a timeout. At one point, after each timeout, I'm saying they're going to need those. They think they have this game in the bag. They're going to need those timeouts. And sure enough, down the stretch, when you see the clock getting drained out by the Jaguars kicking that field goal, now let's spend time giving props to the Jaguars because they made the comeback, right? Doug Peterson. I know so many people trashing. The guy won a Super Bowl in Philadelphia. Morning, Eddie. We're back at it. Yeah, early today. Early. It's a rarity. My daughter's off school, so we're going to spend some time with her in the late afternoon. I think the usual filming time. So, but Doug Peterson, so he wins a Super Bowl with the Eagles, and then he was quickly fired after that, and the near future after that. And a lot of people said he's a fraud. He's a fraud. I always thought he was a good play designer. I thought he had a good grip on how to approach games. He's shown that this year. He's a good coach. Say what you want, whatever. He has, and the thing I like best about him in this game, though, you could see him on the side when they put the camera on him. He's a calming. Sauger, morning. You could see that he has a calming influence on his young team. He had a lot to do with them staying grounded when they were down 27-0. So I'm going to give great props to Doug Peterson. And Trevor Lawrence, yes, the coach, but Trevor Lawrence, despite two of them not really being his fault, 4 interceptions in the first half, yet he comes back. The defense, like I said, they weren't covering much, but he was taking advantage of it. He was doing what he needed to do. And that's what you ask for. He is going to be a great player. He's on his way there. This year is really streaky like this game. It wasn't 4 interceptions streaky. When you look at his season, he had a period of cold spell. Then he had a hot streak for 3 or 4 weeks. Then he kind of went cold again. Then he had a 3-week hot streak. And it was back and forth and back and forth. And he doesn't have weapons, so we understand that. But when he gets some weapons, and his natural maturation as a quarterback process, I do think he's going to be one of the elite quarterbacks in the game. So now, we'll talk later in the week breaking down, so I won't spend much time here. But 2 things. We'll do one. Jaguars are going to play the Chiefs now. When I break that down, I'm going to be very concerned about how the Jaguars' pass defense is able to hold up against the diverse passing attack of the Chiefs. The Chiefs don't want to run the ball anyway, and you really don't run much against the Jaguars. They're number 8 defense, but they're very good up the middle. They're not going to waste their time running. Screen game to McKinnon, a few runs maybe on the outside, but their offensive line's very good, which, as opposed to the Chargers, don't have a good line. So I do, when we break this down, it's going to be very interesting as we'll see if any trends that I see. Now, the Chargers, look, should Brandon Staley be fired? I don't know. I think for his defensive mind, they want him. I think what they need to do is they need to get a new offensive coordinator. Remember that we have a quarterback in Justin Herbert, one of the strongest arm quarterbacks in the league. And what he's doing is throwing short. It's not his fault. It's a coaching. Joe Lombardi, in my opinion, has said, this is my plan. This is my system. We're running it. And I don't care if I have Justin Herbert. I'm going to run it like I got a weak arm quarterback. And that needs to go. You have a legendary potential quarterback here. So we'll see what happens. All right, Seattle and the 49ers. So in this game, the Seahawks gave us a great half of football. I mean, they were up by a point at half, I believe, 17-16 sounds right. And they looked great, and they played very well. And very, very impressed. They were down 10-0, and then they came roaring back. We thought the weather would be a big factor when we handicapped this game, and it wasn't a factor at all. To me, it was zero factor. The obvious turning point of the game for most, and it's obvious, it's true, was the strip sack when the Seahawks were moving the ball down the field. They were just inside the 20 in field goal range, 3rd and 14 maybe, and then they strip sack and they get the ball from Geno Smith, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, it's 41-17, and the game is way over. But I think the turning point came before that. Even if Seattle scored, I think they were going to get torched when Jonathan Abram ridiculously decided to twist up Deebo Samuel's leg after a completed pass. Play was over, no flag. Samuel was rightfully pissed. Guy could have hurt him. I think at that point they woke up, here's a cliche, the sleeping giant. And I said, oh, man, you did not want to do that, because now the 49ers are going to be like galvanized on offense, and you're screwed. Thanks, Jonathan Abram. And at that point, honestly, the 49ers were a machine on offense. So let's just quickly go back to the Seahawks. The Seahawks wisely used DK Metcalf heavily. Charvarius Ward had pressed him in the last meeting, week 14, and he did guard him here. But obviously, DK Metcalf is one of the most physical receivers in the game, and that was their advantage. And so they did consistently go to him. In the first half, I like the fact they were able to have a lead while being balanced, because you don't really run on the 49ers, but Ken Walker was getting it done. It was like 4 yards a carry. He had like 50 yards on the ground in the first half. And remember, nobody had I don't know if it's 50, it might have been 42, but nobody's had 70 yards all season on the ground, and they didn't in this game. But in the first half, it was certainly going that way, and they were definitely hanging tight. But then once the 49ers were able to get rolling on offense, that was obviously going to be it. Now, the 49ers, here's what we talked about. We said that Shanahan finally had McCaffrey and Deebo, Kittle, and Ayuk all on the field at the same time healthy. Kyle Juszczyk's a big deal here, too. He doesn't get the ball a lot, but, man, he just allows him to do so many things from a schematic standpoint. But really getting Deebo in that offense was massive, and they just leveraged Deebo and McCaffrey. And here's the thing. You can use them as runners. You can use them as receivers. You can move them in the formation to get them on the mismatches. The defense, if they want to decide to put extra bodies that way, then you divert to the other. If they try to take both of them out, you got Kittle and Ayuk. There is no winning combination, because all four of those players are elite playmakers. Yes, Brandon Ayuk is an elite playmaker. He just hasn't had opportunity. But if he was in an offense where he was the focal point and getting 10 targets in a lot of games, we would see him light up. He's an amazing, amazing football player. And obviously, you know what George Kittle is. George Kittle has always been, is he going to get targets? And they didn't need him. So therefore, he had 2 catches. It was like 37 yards, but that's 2 catches. That's good yardage for 2 catches, right? But it was the Deebo and McCaffrey show. And it's going to be for the rest of the playoffs. Whoever they see, you can't take them both out, and you can motion them. There are so many things. And of course, Brock Purdy. Well, we said it before. I mean, Brock Purdy's doing a great job. He's going through his reads. The offense is perfect for him. The Shanahan offense does things very well to set up his quarterbacks for success. But when you have these weapons, the defense can never commit to like making you the quarterback, the focal point. We can't just like sell out to stop pressure. Oh, what's my hot route? It's Christian McCaffrey on a screen. 50 yards later, he's in the end zone, right? So you can't do that. So we will look forward to see the 49ers. We don't know who they're playing yet. The 49ers will play the winner of the Tampa Bay Dallas game. We'll break that down later in the week, but it was very fun to watch that. And then let's go to the Sunday games. Miami, we talked about this, and we talked about, if you watch the Sunday show that I did, we went over this one, and I said there were 2 things that Miami needed to do. First of all, they needed to bring a lot of pressure. They did. They were successful. We talked about how Josh Allen is not taking care of the football this year. I think it was 14 picks and 13 fumbles. Well, he had 2 picks and 3 fumbles. He only lost one of them, fortunately for him. But this is the Josh Allen we've seen lots here. Now he's getting by, right? He's an elite fantasy option. He's putting numbers up. The Bills are winning. But as the competition gets further and further down the line here, Cincinnati this week, and who knows if they win and go further, but whatever the case is, Josh Allen is not getting away with putting the ball in harm's way, as he's consistently done in the second half of the season. That will not get them to the Super Bowl. And this offense is flawed right now, because we even saw Stephon Diggs had 90, maybe 95-ish yards in the first half. He ended up at 114. I kind of said he'd get his in this game, but he wouldn't go off, and I thought it was going to be wrong. And then the second half, it kind of went back to what we saw all year. He hasn't had many 100-yard games since week 10. That might have been the second. He had one, I think, back-to-back weeks he's had 100 yards, but it wasn't like, because they didn't use him in the second half, it's not his fault, but it wasn't a dominant performance because they didn't use him, not because of Steph Diggs. Steph Diggs, whatever it is, he could have gotten done. But the pressure, that was the first thing. So Miami did that very well. And they had, in their front 7, they got 4 guys who are elite pressure type guys. So they had it going on. And that means the secondary doesn't have to do as much. They were going to take their chances. They were going to lose downfield plays. They knew that. But that's part of the risk you have to take. You can't just sit back and pick apart your bad secondary. And then on offensive side, here's where I thought Mike McDaniel blew it. Now, it could have worked, right? We saw Jalen Waddle drop an easy deep pass. We saw Tyreek Hill drop one. We saw another one that got broken up on Waddle. Some of those deep passes were going to hit for them. But I thought even if they did it, living on those would not have been the way to attack Buffalo. I thought that they could have been using a lot of jet motion with Hill and Waddle and either faking it, screening, running the running back counter to that. There were so many ways they could have just completely obliterated the Buffalo run defense, and they didn't. They used a little of that in the second half, and it was successful. But I really thought they could have gone that route. Now, who's going to complain, right? They were winning this game. They had a chance to win this thing. So, I mean, you don't argue, but it worked out really well. But I just, like I said, that said, I think that they waited a little too late to do the offensive things that they needed to do, but their defense, we had that touchdown by the defense. It was an amazing game. Miami, I'm not going to do a post-mortem, but they didn't have anybody. The Hill and Waddle were there, but they didn't have a quarterback. Their running back was out. Wilson was dinged up again. Wilson's going to be hard to draft in fantasy. I had him this year. I drafted him in the later rounds of drafts, believe it or not. In the Kings Classic, I had him. But ultimately, he was banged up too much this year, and he's always been a guy that has some injury issues, so we'll see with that. But again, we'll preview Buffalo, Cincinnati later in the week. That's going to be a very fun one to watch here. All right, and let's go to the next game. That was the Giants and the Vikings. So we talked about this too. Brian Daboll, he is so good at being preemptive in his game plan. He just is excellent about knowing what to expect, how to attack, and he attacked Minnesota flawlessly. Now, I know he has a defensive coordinator too, and so, we'll give Don Wink Martindale credit here too, but I think Daboll has input into this because Martindale loves the blitz. But when they play Justin Jefferson, and remember, we've seen now Dallas limited Jefferson because the pressure was so bad on Cousins, but Green Bay took their top corner and Jair Alexander gave him help, and they were able to, even in the slot, bracket him, and he didn't have numbers. And so Adoree Jackson was back for the Giants, and they put Adoree Jackson on him a lot, and they also would bracket. And so basically they were taking him away. Now, I think a good offensive coordinator, you got to figure that out. You've got to find a way to get your legendary player open. I mean, it was a sin that on the last drive of the game, and they needed a touchdown, Justin Jefferson didn't see a target. At some point, you got to figure it out. You've got to get him the ball. And they didn't, and they lost, and it's on them. Dalvin Cook, I'm concerned for Dalvin Cook. The numbers were there this year. He's a declining back. He just doesn't have the consistent explosiveness. And we saw it again yesterday, just not consistently explosive. Another year, he's going to probably continue to downgrade there. So I am not optimistic on Dalvin Cook, especially if he's going in the first round of drafts. I don't know if he will. Second round is going to be iffy. And he'll be like, to me, it'd be like an end of the second, top of the third round as a running back too. I'm not signing up on his right. And I'm Dalvin Cook truther. But that said, so the Giants did a great job of taking away Jefferson, and therefore the rest of the offense paid for that. And the Giants on offense, they again understood that first meeting that they were well prepared for when they met a few weeks ago. You attack Minnesota with the pass, but they can't stop running quarterbacks. We talked about that last week, and they leveraged Daniel Jones heavily. And they also were not good against receiving backs. So they dialed down Barkley's carries. He did really well in the ones he had, but they, again, used him heavily as a receiver. And so that game plan was working to the Vikings' limitations. And so phenomenal coaching job again for Brian Daboll. And, they got Isaiah Hodgins in for a big game. It basically against this Viking secondary, pick your poison. Really, in reality, Slayton had a really good game too. Richie James, not quite the same. He had a big game in the first time around, but there was so much to go around. And so anyway, this was just Brian Daboll understanding both offensively, and then he and Don Martindale defensively on how to approach. If I didn't say this earlier, they dialed the blitzing way down, and that was smart. That was very smart on defense. So great matchup there for them. Vikings. Justin Jefferson obviously will be a top 3 pick, top 2 pick, top 1 pick in fantasy next year. But I'm gonna, as I dig through, we saw 4 games, and it's only 4 that were not very good for fantasy, including the playoff game. Now I understand players all have peaks and valleys, but man, you always wonder. NFL tapes out. This is what we do. If they don't add other weapons, will defenses use this as a blueprint, and will the Vikings be smart enough to leverage Justin Jefferson? Now, I assume, he's a superstar. He's one of the best players we have in the league. I assume all will be fine. But when I dig under the hood a little bit, I just want to, find out some trends and ideas. I mean, I don't think there's any scenarios outside the top 3 picks, but I really didn't like that he had, those 4 limited games, and they were basically due to what defenses had done. That bothered me a little bit because that shouldn't happen. But that said, we move forward. All right. And then the night game. Night game was excellent. Baltimore, look, when we were talking about the betting on this one, it's like, my goodness, you're getting more than a touchdown with a John Harbaugh team. You're taking those points every single time. They're well coached. They're disciplined. They're not going to hurt themselves. And therefore, they went ahead and they did what they needed to do. They covered the spread. They had every chance of winning that game. But unfortunately, Tyler Huntley made a tactical error almost 2 yards away with his 6-foot frame trying to dive out with the ball. And obviously he gets knocked loose. Sam Hubbard runs at the length of the field for the touchdown. And the game completely has a 14-point swing at a pivotal point in the game. I don't know if the Ravens would have won had they scored, but they certainly, probably worst case scenario, would have been in overtime, because there wasn't a whole ton of time left in the game. And so realistically, in the way the Ravens were playing defense, they were not giving up anything. And we've seen it before. I mean, this is a divisional opponent. This is the 3rd time they've held Joe Burrow under 220 yards. And they keep a lid over the top and they just say discipline. Jamar Chase got his, but he didn't go off. Remember, Jamar Chase, the only teams he went off against this year were the NFC South teams. He hasn't really, since he had those original explosion games we saw this year, teams are understanding how to defend him. He's still one of the best players in the game, but you can keep him from those massive games. And that's happened a lot. I always said the teams that have never seen him before, I don't think they understand this type of speed he has, and then they kind of get caught up in it, and that's what happens. But most of the conference now, AFC, has seen him. So I don't think he's that slam dunk like this year. He's like a top 5, 6 in pick in fantasy. I think he's an excellent receiver. I think he's one of the better ones in the game. But I think right now we're looking maybe pick 15, pick 13, because he just, other than the NFC South games, there wasn't the ceiling there that we need if we want to have a wide receiver 1 in the first round. I may rethink that, but right now that's kind of where I'm at on that. Again, love the player. Ultra talented, but I just think that defense has kind of figured out, and Burrow's happy to take what the defense gives them. So he's not going to force the ball. And so that kind of works against them as well. And again, there's the offensive line. And so Baltimore, look, we don't know what to do with Lamar Jackson in the offseason, but here's the thing with J.K. Dobbins. That's the one I'll focus on as I close up here. So J.K. Dobbins, he is, in my mind, one of the better running backs in the league. But I don't think he's ever getting usage with John Harbaugh. If he didn't get usage last night, remember, since his rookie year in 2020, he missed 2021 with an injury, and then 2022. He very rarely sees more than 15 carries in a game. Now, he had 3 catches last night, but he's very rarely used as a receiver. So basically, he's a rushing factor, not a receiving factor. Not that he can't receive. He's a very good receiver, and I think he should be used that way, but he's not. And I don't know if it's going to change. And the problem becomes, where is his ceiling? You need him to maximize those 15 carries, and that's a risky proposition. And so, again, I think he's an elite player, but I think depending where his ADP falls, that's going to be very interesting to see, because to me, he's a 3rd-round pick, because the cap of the ceiling of the touches, like I said, the Ravens almost won that game. Going in, I thought that Dobbins had to get 20 to 25 carries in that game. He and Edwards split it down the middle. And to me, when they're doing it at that point, when the season's on the line, now again, they almost won, and Harbaugh's a great coach, but I mean, I really think they could have maximized even further. Just obviously, when you watched, clearly there's no comparison between Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. One's an elite player, one's a very good, rotational back, but it just was unfortunate to watch. So anyway, I think we're good. Let's see. Sagar, I have a question. I am doing a video for Monkey Knife Fight in about a half an hour from this live recording that will be posted up. So I will be going over both the Brady and the Dak passing yardage. So you'll have to watch out for the Monkey Knife Fight posts. I believe those come out on Instagram. At some point they make their way to Twitter, but definitely follow Monkey Knife Fight on that, and we will definitely cover that. Don't see any other questions. So let's have a great week getting ready for the divisional round of playoffs. Let's enjoy tonight's game between the Bucks and the Cowboys. I will be back Wednesday and Thursday this week to preview one day the AFC games, one day the NFC games. We'll be back Saturday. Pure MVP, thanks, man. On Saturday, we'll do the gambling show again with John Ryan. We'll get you all set up for NFL weekend here. And Sirius XM will be on tomorrow night, Tuesday night, 8 to 10 Eastern with Jeff Erickson. I'll be on Channel 87 also Saturday and Sunday doing pregame shows both days, 1 to 3. So look forward to that. And please give me a follow at Jim Coventry NFL on Twitter. I'll do threads to get you all set up there. And if you're on YouTube, please smash the like and subscribe button. If you want 2 days free behind the RotoWire paywall, go to rotowire.com/try. All right, everybody, thank you for your time. It's the most valuable thing you have. You spent it with me, Eddie. You're welcome. And we will talk soon.